Biden, Trump's likely presidential rival, he's likely to get the Democrat nomination for 2020, now coming out and saying Trump should be impeached. There is a development on this story before I bring in our guest, Eric Lisann. And Eric, I hope you can hear this. President Trump saying on Wednesday that the White House would cooperate now with the House of Representatives impeachment inquiry if House Democrats, and this is the quote, Eric Lisann, I hope you're hearing me, give us our rights. Let's bring in Eric Lisann to comment on this, former US federal prosecutor and lawyer both in the US and France. And Eric, of course, keeping a keen eye on this story for us. Eric, good evening to you. Tell us about that then. Is this obviously an about-face from Trump?
It's a sort of about-face, but you have to remember that Trump veers and zigs and zags all over the road, and nobody who even works for him and tries to obey his every wish really knows what he's going to say from one moment to the next, because he doesn't even know what he's going to say from one moment to the next. He has a goal in mind, and that's to do what's the best for him personally, but the way he gets there is unique to him. This statement is just meaning, quite simply, that if they do all the rules that I want to impose on them so that my conduct is portrayed in the best light possible and that all incriminating evidence against me is put in a dark corner someplace so that nobody talks about it, then I will cooperate. But that's really not his choice to make. He doesn't have the option of cooperating or not under the Constitution. He already directed his lawyer to send out a letter stating that he would not cooperate. It's an outrageous letter from a legal point of view because it violates all sorts of constitutional principles, and it's an obvious play just to gain time to push this as further back and as close to the election as possible so that maybe under the wire he can slide in and get elected before the actual impeachment proceedings take place. It's not likely that any of that will work. The Democrats are pushing forward on impeachment. The rules are clear. And if there's already so much evidence out there mounting against the president, much of it from his own mouth, that they have what they need to force this into the Senate, where there will then be a vote. Now, that might take several weeks. It might take several months. But the agenda for the Congress is clear. And it's unlikely that anything that the president says at this point is going to change that.
The Democrats saying, Eric, that the president, Trump, is not above the law. Perhaps he thinks he is from what you're saying. He's called the impeachment inquiry illegitimate. That's the word he used. But surely that's just his opinion, because I imagine this is legitimate. It does have legal basis.
It's completely legitimate. The declaration that he put out earlier today was, from a legal point of view, just an embarrassment, but it's a call to arms for those that are in his corner no matter what. And it's a signal to Republican senators and maybe some in the House of Representatives as well, although they are in the minority, the Republicans are. It's a signal to them that he's going to fight this every step of the way. He doesn't want to give an inch, and he's going to turn on anybody who takes a position that is contrary to his. But from a legal point of view, he's losing every single court decision that's coming out on this subject. And indeed, it's not even very close. We talked the other day about the tax decision, for example, coming out of New York. The judge had very harsh words, and those words were followed up in another oral argument yesterday in federal court in Washington, D.C., where the judge just responded, wow, to the arguments by Trump's attorneys that he was, in effect, above the law and he had the ability to refuse to turn over evidence or not cooperate. He is. It's a very brazen way of trying to stand everything on his head and on its head. And as we see from what's going on in Turkey, he is not mindful of the consequences. He's gotten here by being a bull in a china shop, and he will be that way until the very end.
And what about the legal advice that he's getting, Eric? Because from what you're telling us, the lawyers are giving advice that really, or maybe they're just doing what he says, because clearly what he's asking for is something the law doesn't accommodate.
Exactly. That's exactly right. They're doing what he says. even when it's in violation of the law. And several of the lawyers in the White House and at the NSC, that's the National Security Council, are already in the crosshairs of various investigations because they have locked down or they up-classified these transcripts of calls with national security leaders, like the one in Ukraine that, of course, has caused all of the impeachment proceedings where we are right now. The lawyers were involved in that. They did take actions that were themselves illegal, and they have tried to cover it up by assertions of what's called attorney-client privilege or executive privilege, which don't apply. Now, the events are going very quickly, and the news cycle and the courts and everything else that's involved hasn't had a chance to catch up to it. Some of this is going to take a long time to sort through. There is so much here that's going on. But what is clear is that the president himself, as Joe Biden pointed out today in the clip that you played a couple minutes ago, the president has essentially hung himself by his own words, and we're seeing already in the polling of the American public that even the public, even Republicans, are starting to understand that. So it may just be a game of time right now. Can the president drag this on? Can other things happen? And the ramifications of this are global. We see in Turkey things that are not unrelated to what's going on here. All of this is tied together. So all of us need to pay very close attention to these developments.
And thank you for your analysis, Eric. Eric Lisann, our legal expert there. Thank you so very much indeed. It's time for a very short break. After